Welcome to Ali Fitness Podcast, a weekly production all about bringing health into fitness. Justin Strahan is a co-founder of Joovv. Not just any man can take his wife's dream and make it a reality. Justin's affinity for process and extreme attention to detail is why Joovv are lucky to have him as head of R&D. Prior to inventing and developing the Joovv, he spent his career as an engineer managing design and development teams. Justin, pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Ali. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Excellent. Well, we were just talking offline and I can't wait to start testing my Joovv. I believe it'll arrive tomorrow. So let's find out all about it today. So I guess to start with, where did the concept of Joovv come from?
It really goes back to my wife's search for alternative health therapies, and she has been for a long time been interested in ways to improve not only her health but also those of our entire family. So myself and we're blessed with to have 6 children, and so she was basically researching ways to improve, basically address different types of health issues, some skin related. And then also interested in things like thyroid function and really just improving overall health. So she had heard about a salon in the Twin Cities, which is Minneapolis, Minnesota area where we previously lived. And there was a salon that had tanning beds that had been converted for the purpose of red light therapy. And she'd heard of it before, primarily for skin health for the face, but this was something that she could do on her whole body. So she was intrigued and signed up for several months package. I believe it was 2 months initially, and then I think she repeated that. And she went faithfully every day and was really impressed with the overall glow of her skin, and saw some pretty cool things in terms of reduction and really over the course of 4 months totally eliminated some severe eczema issues that she'd had. So she became a firm believer in it, had our oldest son going there as well. And by the end of that kind of trial period, she was trying to find something that she could use at home, because it was, from a time standpoint and cost standpoint, it was quite difficult to make the trek over to a salon every single day for this treatment. So she kind of scoured the internet and was a little bit frustrated to find that there were no options for at-home full body red light therapy, and had kind of given up on the concept for a little while, but then read again a few months later on about the benefits. And at that time, she approached me about the possibility of building or designing something that we could use at home. And at this point, it was we were not thinking developing a company or anything along those lines. It was simply something that she could use at home to avoid having to go to the salon, and we could, our whole family could benefit. So she had looked at initially some things where people had used infrared heat lamps to use at home for kind of a type of homemade light, and I guess what we really discovered later on is more accurately really a sauna type experience. But so that was really the original project. What was basically a fairly crudely developed product using infrared heat lamps that we had experimented with. And kind of throughout this process, we discovered there's some significant differences between infrared heat lamps and the types of lights that you'd really see that she was really seeing the benefits with. So that's really kind of how we got started. From there, she really encouraged me strongly to dig into the science, and I initially was quite skeptical, but was really surprised to find that there are literally thousands of published research papers in this field of light therapy, or the technical term is photobiomodulation. And it was really surprising to read that the benefits didn't just stop with the skin or collagen production benefits. It really extended to everything from reduced joint pain, inflammation, improved muscle recovery, wound healing, thyroid function. I mean, just about an unlimited range of health benefits. So I apologize for the long-winded answer there, but yeah, it was quite a journey early on as we just really discovered the science and the benefits, and that's how we got started.
Excellent. So I definitely want to come back to the benefits later, but let's start from scratch then. You mentioned PBM or photobiomodulation, and you mentioned light therapy. But before we even go there, where does red light fit into the electromagnetic spectrum?
Great question. So part of natural sunlight, you have a wide range of spectrums that you refer to. So the kind of the main ones we'll focus on for the purposes of this conversation, you have UV wavelengths that are basically shorter than 400 nanometers, and those have benefits for stimulating vitamin D production, for example. And then you have the visible light spectrum that's between 400 nanometers and 700 nanometers, so literally all the colors of the rainbow. And then beyond 700 nanometers, you get into the infrared spectrum, and that gets further broken down into near infrared, which is 700 nanometers to 1300 nanometers, and then the mid range of near infrared between 1300 and 3000 nanometers, and then far infrared, 3000 meters or nanometers all the way up to 1 micron. So in those wavelengths have significantly different properties. So they have different effects on our bodies. So whereas with photobiomodulation, we're looking at specific wavelengths of light in the red spectrum, roughly between 600 and 670 nanometers. And then again, in the near infrared spectrum, just beyond the visible range, at 800 to 880 nanometers.
Okay, so why those two spectrums?
That's really interesting because there's obviously physiological effects from different wavelengths. I referenced the UV wavelengths, for example, for vitamin D production. But what the research has demonstrated quite convincingly, I might add, is that those two specific ranges are the most effective at helping to restore healthy cellular function down to the mitochondrial level, which are essentially the engines of or powerhouses of the cell. So these basically electron chain transport processes that go on inside virtually every cell in our body. What we find is their function is literally degrades over time. So it's literally part of the aging process. And there's also a number of different factors that negatively impact and can inhibit proper cellular function. And what's been really interesting and eye-opening to see, over the past several years, and as delving into this whole world of photobiomodulation, is just the amazing impact that light has and the role that it plays in our overall health.
Okay, so I know the Joovv light, and I think it's polychromatic light therapy is its term, because I assume that's because it looks at the 660 and the 850, and is it 50% of both of those spectrums?
Correct. Yes, roughly 50% of the output is at each of those wavelengths.
And why is that?
Great question. So even though both of those wavelengths have essentially the same impact at a cellular level in terms of the processes that are involved, what we find is red wavelengths are more quickly absorbed by the upper layers of the skin tissue. So they're very effective at boosting collagen production, for example. Whereas the near infrared wavelengths in that mid 800 range are much more effective at passing through to deeper tissues. So they're more effective for benefits such as muscle recovery, reduced joint pain, inflammation, those sorts of things.
Okay, so you get the combination of both. So we've heard a lot about near infrared, like from the terms of like saunas and things like that, and we've had the Sunlighten guys come on the show as well, so we know a fair bit about sort of near infrared and the benefits there. But so if we're getting those benefits, say from the sauna, how then or why then do we need light therapy? So what does light therapy offer that, say, a sauna doesn't?
Really, they're just two separate forms of treatment. So the primary role of a sauna is basically to raise the temperature of body tissues. So you're inducing heat shock proteins, for example, to produce cardiovascular system function similar to exercise. And there's a whole host of different benefits that arise from that. But really, the original design purpose of saunas is really relegated to that sort of therapy. So, historically speaking, infrared saunas have used wavelengths longer than 3,000 nanometers. So, Sunlighten, as well as other sauna manufacturers, most of the vast amount of energy that's being delivered is actually is significantly above 3,000 nanometers, so in the 5,000 nanometer range on up. Now, I think partially in response to market confusion on just infrared, I think most people, when they hear the term infrared, they think of a wavelength or a specific kind of range, but in reality, it's a very broad range. So as I mentioned previously, and kind of breaking down those ranges, they play different roles. So where photobiomodulation, we're using a very high amount of energy at a specific wavelength versus kind of a broad a range of wavelengths that's actually not very focused in terms of a specific wavelength.
Okay, so essentially it's quite focused. I actually like the analogy that you gave in one of your talks, and you mentioned it's like saying, do you concentrate on nutrition or do you concentrate on exercise? Well, you actually do both.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's we have some people that ask, can we do photobiomodulation and a sauna treatment at the same time? And as you point out, it's kind of like saying, well, can you eat while you're running a marathon? Well, I guess you could. I wouldn't recommend it because your body's trying to do two totally different things. So whereas a sauna treatment is really basically putting your body under stress in a way that produces biological responses and benefits. Light therapy or photobiomodulation is really more of similar to nutrition, where you're basically feeding your cells nutrition that they can essentially digest. Actually, not too dissimilar to the process of photosynthesis in plants.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think you've cleared that up for us then. So I guess my next question is with regards to like laser versus LED. There's a lot of confusion out there. I hear people like Dr. Lou Lim talk about, I'm not sure if you're familiar with his product, the Vialite, which is, I think, an intranasal product. And it's I assume laser focused, whereas your Joovv is LED. What's the difference there?
Yeah, no, the original research that has been conducted, photobiomodulation was actually originally referred to as LLLT, or low-level laser therapy, sometimes referred to as cold lasers. And they're basically in the treatment, they would use lasers to affect these same sort of biological responses that we're referring to. And what was really discovered in the mid to late 90s was the realization and understanding that LEDs were could be just as effective as lasers, and it really just boiled down to the wavelengths and the intensity of the light. And furthermore, the realization and understanding that LEDs, because they didn't have that same focus that a laser does, there wasn't the need to be concerned with overheating tissue, which can be an issue with using lasers. So the bulk of the research really since that time period has really changed to include primarily, or at least a significant portion of the research in the LED, using LED technology. And so that's been interesting to see. And it was so much so that the term was actually changed from calling it LLT to photobiomodulation as, kind of a more inclusive term. But from a technological perspective, lasers, where you're using a coherent light source. So with a laser, every single photon is in phase, which basically means it's in the same wave. that all the other photons are in, and they're at the exact same wavelength. So that enables the beam to be coherent, or basically stay together, and it can be a very focused beam. And so they're very effective for some certain functions, but the problem is the treatment area is quite small. So with an LED, we're able to deliver a similar light power output, but now we have treatment areas up to including your entire body.
Okay, so essentially then, let's say you had one, say, skin issue that was in a very small part of the body that was just very easy to sort of focus on. Would you be better off using laser in that instance?
You could certainly use a laser for focused treatment. Most lasers are used for deeper tissue benefits. So, for example, folks that are undergoing had a surgery on a joint, for example, or a physical therapist is going to help do a recovery with them. Since the power delivery for skin health benefits really doesn't take as much energy, LEDs are actually a much better application for that sort of benefit.
Okay, great. So are there any sort of contraindications for using the Joovv?
No, in fact, we are FDA approved. We've gone through significant testing, international safety, electrical testing, including eye health safety testing. So there's a wide range of things that we undergo as part of that FDA approval process. But yeah, that's one thing that's really nice about photobiomodulation and the Joovv is there's not dangers, like I mentioned, that it can be an issue with lasers where you have the propensity to or possibility of raising the temperature of tissues. So we get questions. One of the big ones I mentioned is the eye health safety. Because of the brightness of the LEDs, that can be something that people question, but they are safe for the eyes. In fact, there's a significant number of research studies pointing to some pretty incredible benefits for various degenerative eye disorders. So yeah, there's really no in the thousands of published clinical research studies, there's really no contraindications to speak of.
Wow. And so what are the other benefits? I mean, you mentioned a few, and actually I'd like to go into a bit more about thyroid. You mentioned that your wife sort of used that as a way to help the thyroid.
Yes, it's interesting because at the cellular level, by restoring this electron chain transport process and really boosting the function of the mitochondria and the output of the cell, and in terms of the cellular energy or ATP, the result of that process is it basically affects every function of cells. So one that has become a popular source of research studies is thyroid function, and it's quite easy to reach with light therapy treatment because it's so close to the surface of the skin in the neck. So there's some interesting studies for both hyper and hypothyroid conditions. So it's pretty amazing what light can do. It's basically providing the energy that the body needs to perform some of these functions the way that it was designed.
Yeah, in actual fact, I think it'd be easier for me to say what can't it do, because it sounds like it can do a number of things. And a lot of the studies I've read, I mean, even testosterone is another big thing that seems to be a game changer for a lot of people using Joovv.
It is, and that's quite honestly one that we didn't anticipate, when we started. But there's been significant research conducted in that area, and we've had some people that have some pretty impressive results of before and after test results for their testosterone and free testosterone levels. So the challenge is it can kind of sound too good to be true, and so that's kind of a hurdle for us, quite honestly. Is if you peruse our website and look at the Learn page and read our product reviews, the benefits are so expansive that it can sound that way. But we from the very beginning we've had a 60-day return policy that can give people that peace of mind that, hey, you can try it, and if you don't see the benefits that you're looking for, you can return it for a full refund.
Okay. And I mean, of course, it's going to depend on the person and on the benefit, but what sort of time frame would you be looking at for certain benefits?
It, as you mentioned, it certainly depends on the individual and the types of benefits. But I would say that most people, within a matter of weeks, can tell that it's good for them, that it's beneficial in some way or another. Sometimes they may not be able to exactly put their finger on it. Even at conferences or shows where we have the units on display, where people find themselves coming back to the booth the next day or the next, later on in the day, just like literally drawn to the light because of whatever sense it is. I don't know if it's like cognitive benefits or it's relaxing. But breaking it down to specific benefits, I would say there's some things that people notice right away, sometimes within the very first session. So athletes, for example, that are very in tune with their bodies, they know what their muscles feel like the day after specific workout regimens that they go through. And the vast majority are pretty struck by the difference with using a session either typically after or sometimes even before their workouts. So that's one thing. A lot of times people notice improved sleep quality very quickly. There are some benefits that are a little bit more long term. So there's kind of a cumulative effect there. For example, collagen production for skin health is typically something that you would see at least 3, 4, 5 weeks before you really start to notice much. Most of the clinical studies, in fact, are actually more in the range of 10 to 12 weeks that are showing the reduced wrinkles and those sorts of things. Wow! So you can even reduce your wrinkles. Yeah, it's interesting. Photobiomodulation has there's so many things. It makes it difficult to kind of pinpoint your market, if you will. So that's one thing that we really try to focus on is just explaining the science. And all of the articles on our website have multiple clinical research studies that we cite, so that it's not just our opinion. These are based on legitimate research studies that have been conducted, and several of which have been conducted by Dr. Michael Hamblin, who we're fortunate to have on our scientific advisory board. He's widely regarded as one of, if not the leading expert in the world of photomedicine as a head researcher at Harvard. Right. And what about weight loss? Of course, that's the biggest question from all of my clients is, will I lose weight? There's definitely a lot of interest there, and there are some interesting studies, primarily around the slimming effects. Maybe more would be maybe a better way to put it than actual weight loss. But because it does affect our cellular function and our body's ability to regulate hormone production, metabolism, there are certainly those that see some significant benefits in that way. Okay. So before we go into the details about how to use it and what it looks like, can you share with us how we would even choose a product? I mean, of course, after listening to this, everyone's going to go and buy Joovv, but what sort of things will we look at when we're looking to buy like a PBM device? Yeah, that's a great thing that we've tried to bring more education to the marketplace, and really it boils down to a couple of key things. The intensity of the light is really one of the most critical things. The wavelengths, there's a lot of companies out there that get the wavelengths correct. It's not too difficult. But probably thirdly, and I think this is where we really set ourselves apart from the other options in the marketplace, is just the treatment area or size of the device. So with Joovv, we have a modular design. We're able to start with a single panel that could basically treat part of your upper body. And then if you want to at a later time, after you see the benefits, you can actually add to that. Or some people just, from the very beginning, go with one of our more of a full body system, like what you've got coming to your place. So it's the treatment area is a big thing. There's other factors. Obviously, I would choose, make sure that you're picking a company that stands behind the products that they sell. I would highly recommend choosing a company that has FDA approval, because there's a significant level of testing that's required to meet those standards. So those would be some of the main things that I would recommend exploring before you make a purchase.
Okay, so you mentioned the first thing was intensity. What sort of intensity are we looking for?
Yeah, so it's kind of a confusing part of photobiomodulation. I particularly find it interesting with my engineering background, but the technical term for it is irradiance, and it's typically given in the units of milliwatts per square centimeter, and it's literally a measure of the rate of energy delivery across an area, in this case, square centimeter. So what we see in the research studies is that it takes a significant amount of energy to induce these biological effects. So if you have kind of a small, fairly weak power output, let's say that it's only 2 to 5 milliwatts per square centimeter, to induce some of the benefits, even from a skin health standpoint, it can take 20 to 30 minutes for a session. Whereas with the Joovv device, we're looking at delivery in excess of 30 milliwatts per square centimeter. And that enables us to do basically a much deeper, more effective treatment for the body in just 10 minutes.
Right. So would you recommend then that the optimal sort of minimal viable dose then, I guess, is 10 minutes?
That's our recommended treatment time is 10 minutes. And what we see is basically we've modeled what our recommendation is based on the clinical research and off of folks like Dr. Michael Hamblin. But with a 10-minute session, you're able to give a significant dosage where you're able to benefit both the skin tissues and deeper cellular tissues as well. So down to for the muscles, joints, and so forth.
Okay. Just knowing my listeners and potentially myself as well, we hear 10 minutes and then we think, well, if we do 30 minutes, we might get 3 times the benefits. What do you think about that?
It's kind of a tricky thing, but yes, there's basically becomes a point where your cells are able to only absorb and utilize so much energy. So for most people, that 10 minutes is a great place to start. And people are certainly welcome to kind of experiment with some different times and see different treatment times and see how their body responds. But the 10 minutes is a good place to start. And, I can't think of too many reasons why you'd need to or want to triple that. I think you'd end up just not really receiving much additional benefit at that point.
Exactly. And so intensity being the first thing you mentioned, then wavelengths. What sort of wavelengths? I know you did mention 660 to 850 was sort of your Joovv. Is that what people should be looking for, or?
Yeah, there's a narrow band in both the red and near infrared spectrum that have been shown to be quite effective. We've chosen to use 660 and 850. And those kind of fall right in the middle of that band of the bulk of the clinical research. But yeah, I would say if you're going to pick a device, I would recommend in the 630 to 670 for the red, and the near infrared. The bulk of the research is between 810 and 880 nanometers. So that's the reason why that we have chosen those wavelengths for our devices.
Okay. And then the treatment area, I love how you do have the different modules and you can start with a smaller module. And I assume that if you have a specific area that you wanted to work on, then that would be ideal. And then I guess, depending on cost and what you can afford, you might go up from there. But let's say you just started, say, with the Mini Joovv, which is a fairly small device. How would you use that personally? Let's say you were using that 10 minutes a day. Would you use it on, assuming you didn't have like a particular area that needed, say, a skin issue, would you sort of use it on a different part of the body throughout the day? How would you use that?
It kind of comes down to what the individual's health goals are. I would say a large section of our customers that start with a mini are using it on their face for a different skin health benefits. Although there's other things with the face as well and head that you're getting some of the cognitive benefits, relaxation. There's some interesting studies on PBM for improved sleep quality. And then also with a mini, it's pretty convenient to be able to use to target, a specific area. So let's say an individual's had knee issues, for example, they could, while they're doing other things, they could set up the Joovv Mini and treat their knee. We even had some folks that have had, an acute injury such as a sprain. And, they could do even multiple sessions throughout the day to help relieve the pain and inflammation.
Okay. And then obviously FDA approval is very important. One thing you didn't mention though was like EMF and that sort of the radiation. What ranking, I guess, has Joovv got when it comes to that?
Yes, that's something we're actually in the midst of working on getting an article on our website. We have done third-party testing. There's a significant amount of testing that's required for the FDA approval, but then we're also taking things to an entirely much deeper level to evaluate the different wavelengths in the ELF and EMF wavelengths. To evaluate the safety of the device, ensure that basically people can have that peace of mind. As you point out, people are becoming more aware of the dangers of EMFs as it comes from everything from the electrical wiring in our homes to wireless signals to Bluetooth to cellular their cell phone signals as well. So it's something that we're very aware of. In fact, our oldest son is actually quite sensitive to EMFs. We discovered actually around the same time that we were just looking into light therapy and discovered that was something that he was very sensitive to. So it's something that has been on our radar from the very beginning. And we've taken some pretty drastic steps, in fact, to minimize the EMF output. So we'll be coming out with an article that goes into those specifications. Unfortunately, something as an industry, it's not really something that's typically produced, especially in terms of a third-party testing like we've gone through. So that, as you pointed out, that'd certainly be a valid thing to check into as well.
And what were the results? I know you're going to publish them, but can you share with us?
Yeah, so at the recommended treatment distance, we're below 2 milligauss, which is quite low, and we're actually below 1 volts per meter in the for the high frequency wavelength. So it's to kind of put that in perspective, walking through a typical house that has any type of electrical wiring, you're likely very close to those levels, virtually anywhere in an environment that has electrical power. So it's something that we've taken some fairly extreme steps in terms of the design and of the interior components, even down to things like the power cord, where we're using multiple forms of shielding to reduce the electromagnetic fields from the power supply.
Okay. And then one important question, I guess I haven't sort of asked you, is how close do you hold or stand to the Joovv?
Great question. So the recommended distance is approximately 6 inches. And the reason for that is most of us have limited amounts of time to invest in our health, and at that distance, you can get a deep, effective treatment in just 10 minutes. As you get farther away from the device, the intensity of the light does go down. So for that reason, we do recommend the 6-inch distance. One of the reasons that we've designed our devices the way that we did is by allowing them to be so powerful that they can treat at that distance, it also allows there to be air to keep your body cool as well as the device itself. So the heat that's produced by the LEDs is able to be cooled and basically exported out the back of the device so that it's not actually warming the tissue of your body, which can be inhibitive to the benefits of PBM.
Okay, great. Now, I know Joovv hasn't come out with any sort of wearable product per se, at least I don't think they have. Is that something on the horizon at all?
It's something we've explored. To be perfectly honest, the next thing we're working on is really more of a travel type device. A wearable can be tricky for some of the design aspects in terms of the intensity is difficult to get there where it's effective for deeper tissue without overheating the tissue by having something that you're wearing and holding onto your body. But I wouldn't say we've ruled it out, but it's not something that's in the immediate future.
Okay, and then I guess how does, say, the Mini Joovv compare with something like the in-ear phototherapy or the intranasal?
Sure. The intranasal type device is really geared towards shining that light or those photons on the blood flow that's going into the brain. So where the concept there is by delivering the photons of light to the blood flow, you're able to impact the support and function to the brain. And there are some interesting studies there. We've just taken a different approach where, since virtually all of the cells of the body can benefit from light therapy, we are strong believers in exposing as much of your body as possible to the benefits of red and near-infrared light.
Okay, great. Sorry to sort of put you through the ringer. I've asked you a lot of sort of questions, but I really wanted to sort of get a really great understanding for our listeners. And I guess that leads me to my last sort of question. I've done a fair bit of reading around the benefits, and definitely there are so many studies out there proving or showing the benefits. One question I wanted to ask you about was there seems to be a few conflicting sort of studies around cancer. Does red light therapy speed up cancer growth? Has been a bit of a question, and I know you've got a good article on your website. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, that is a very interesting aspect of light therapy. There initially were some studies where they were basically taking a tumor on its own and shining, basically exposing it to PBM. And there was some conflicting reports of whether it would, actually cause the tumor to grow. But since then, there's been a lot more research that's been conducted on, actual people where the light therapy is actually, helping to basically support the body as it, and attempts to fight off cancer. And while I would say that the overall, prognosis or conventional wisdom after seeing that is still a little bit to be determined. But the early indicators are that, especially with a full body type treatment, there's some significant benefits to be had for even cancer patients. So as you referred to, Dr. Hamblin has a piece that he wrote. It's actually published in a medical journal as well on this very topic, where he summarizes, I believe it's over 50 studies that have been conducted on various forms of cancer and cancer patients, kind of outlining a review of those studies and what they demonstrate.
I love that you're so scientifically validate everything you can. So I really appreciate that, and can't wait to try it out. In fact, talking about people and experiments, I'm actually looking at doing a bit of an N=1 for the next 60 days as soon as it arrives. I'm going to do 10 minutes a day, and I'm going to record my results. What results would you recommend recording? Of course, I've got the Oura Ring, so I can definitely track my sleep. Is there anything else apart from sort of like, I guess, a journal? Is there any other sort of metrics that I should record?
It kind of depends on how far you want to take it, but yeah, a lot of them are honestly subjective. So it's things that you feel about your energy, cognitive function. It's maybe difficult to kind of quantitatively evaluate. But if there are some things, they're going so far as to testing hormone levels, or even blood work, that. There's some interesting studies that have been put out there. Even we have individuals that have done, kind of just their own before and after tests on different things too. So certainly, I would certainly recommend doing some photos, and really anything that you, I guess, are aware, especially of maybe like a health challenge or issue, or if you have like a joint that's bothering you, or things like that. I would just, kind of document your awareness of those issues and see what you experience. Certainly we don't want to make it sound like it's a miracle cure-all, because it isn't, but the benefits are well documented, and most people can experience those at some level, to the point where they're very thankful for the technology and the ability to do it, add it to their daily routine.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to my results. And I guess that brings us to, the last question before I ask a bit of a personal question, Justin, is there anything else that you'd like to let our listeners know about, perhaps a tip, anything at all that might be appropriate for us?
I would just say this is kind of a big picture, but I would just encourage them to start reevaluating the way that they view light and the role that it plays in our overall health. Something that's really radically changed in our society over the past couple hundred years. And I think the latest statistics that I've seen is Americans spend roughly 93% of their lifetime indoors, separated from the sun. So I think even just starting to have some awareness of that, and getting as much natural light as we can be very beneficial. In addition to kind of the supercharged function that you can get from PBM to help restore cellular function.
Excellent. I really, really love that advice. And living in New York, I take any sun I can get. So on that note, I'm about to go outside and enjoy some sun. But before I do, can you tell us, Justin, do you have a tattoo?
I do have a tattoo. I have a couple. I have a fairly large one, actually, on my back.
And what's it of?
It is of a hawk. And it's basically like a shoulder to shoulder. And I've got it, I'm trying to think how many years ago. It's probably been 10 years, but it's a pretty good sized tattoo.
And what does the hawk resemble?
It has, the inscription is justice. So that's actually the meaning of my name, Justin. So that's kind of the reference where that comes from. And
does the light therapy help, keep the tattoo looking shiny?
That's a great question. There is some interesting things with tattoos there because of the pigment. Some people may notice a little bit increased of a warming sensation. I personally don't notice anything with it. But I can't say, and I had it several years before I started the treatment. So you've caught me off guard here with this one, but I can't honestly say if it's helped it to remain, shiny or not. I do plan on actually getting it touched up, because it's been quite some time since I had it originally.
Well, before you get it touched up, do an N=1 for 60 days and take a photo of it every day and let us know.
There you go. That's a great call out there.
Excellent. Justin, thanks again for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. We'll obviously put all the links to all the studies, your website, and everything in the show notes. And yeah, I can't wait to do my experiment.
Excellent. It's been a pleasure. And if anyone has any further questions, feel free to stop by our website. We do have live chat service most of kind of regular business hours. So we're normally available to answer any additional questions you may have. Excellent. Thanks again. Thanks, Allie. It's been a pleasure. For
all the resources and show notes from today's episode, please go to www.ali.fitness. If you liked today's episode, please show your appreciation by going to iTunes, give us a 5-star review and subscribe.